Okay, on this episode of Ivory GC, Sean Gilmartin joining us. He's General Counsel at FPFX Technologies and has had an interesting career in the financial services and fintech industry. So thanks for joining, Sean.
Brian, thanks for having me.
So let's start with talking about your background. Why don't you kind of walk us through your experience and what brought you to FPFX eventually?
Yeah, sure. You use the word interesting. Yeah, that's one way to define my career. It's I did not start out with thoughts of being a lawyer or entering into the legal field. So I came out of school and started at Merrill Lynch trading, both on the floor and upstairs on a trading desk. And what I found was that there were very nuanced rules to trading, and I had an aptitude for them. So as luck would have it, our chief compliance officer and general counsel at Merrill Lynch, along with the trading department, decided I would be better suited going to law school and working as a compliance professional for them rather than sitting on a trading desk. So they were kind enough to actually send me to school at night. So I worked during the day, and we put together a team of compliance professionals to give real-time advice to trading desks throughout Merrill's equity platform. So did 42 months straight, as I think I mentioned to you earlier.
Yeah. God bless you.
Which was not an insignificant amount of time, and wound up working very closely with legal counsel at Merrill, and spent a total of 15 years at Merrill in various capacities on the legal and compliance side before moving to Jefferies. And at the time I moved to Jefferies was a smaller firm. It was primarily an institutional equity shop with a high yield trading desk attached to it. And in the 10 years I was there, it grew from that to a full-blown investment bank with research and investment banking and a full fixed income and sec finance unit. And we grew the compliance department as part of that to right-size it and modernize it. And while I was very happy at Jefferies, the New York Stock Exchange came to me with an opportunity to rebuild their regulatory arm. They, in 2015, were under a regulatory services agreement with FINRA. So FINRA performed all of their regulatory services on an agency basis, and the New York wanted to bring that in-house for their 5 exchanges, 3 of them equity, 2 of them options. And that was really my first exposure to a startup environment, because we really were a startup within an established organization, right? The exchange at 11 Wall Street has been there for over 200 years. But the regulatory division had to be completely crafted from scratch. So in 11 months, we designed 130 different surveillance regimes. We hired 55 people, which meant interviewing close to 400 people during that time frame, trained them, received SEC approval during that time frame. It was a lot of work. It was very rewarding 11 months of work. And then we administrated over the organization once we built it and put it in play. After, I really enjoyed was building that much more so than administrating it. And while I was at the exchange, had the opportunity to look at some early stage ETF products based in Bitcoin. And since back then, nobody at the New York Stock Exchange really knew what a Bitcoin was, we all started getting smarter about digital assets in general and Bitcoin in particular. And I moved from the New York to a crypto exchange based in Japan called Liquid that was looking to onshore to the US. So I got a lot of exposure to crypto, and it was and still is in many ways, a brand new asset, right?
Yeah.
As you know, Bitcoin is only as old as the iPhone, to put it in perspective. And there isn't a lot of concrete regulation around crypto. So, being able to step in and kind of establish in-house controls as opposed to overarching regulatory concerns was a lot of fun. And I've done that at Liquid and then later at Galaxy. And now I've transitioned to more of a technology company as its general counsel, which deals in gamified trading and fantasy gaming platforms. So from that standpoint, the leg over to general counsel with FPFX was in large part easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you have to teach yourself the technology underlying Bitcoin and other digital assets? How did you get smarter on that in that field?
Well, there's a certain amount of reading that everybody does, right? But it was really rolling up your sleeves and getting involved in it and understanding what the pieces were. And actually, buying a Bitcoin is probably the best way to learn about it. Learn about crypto is to dabble in it a little bit.
Yeah.
And have a wallet that you actually hold the stuff in, which gives you a level of responsibility. And there are a number of advocacy groups that have sprung up around this, and most of them are DC based. The Chamber of Digital Commerce is one that I've dealt with quite a bit, and they provide a wealth of guidance both to regulators in DC as well as to the overall financial or fintech community.
Yeah.
The Blockchain Association's another one. So it's definitely been a learn by feel experience with crypto, whereas with traditional financial services, there's established bodies of law, right? And there's almost an apprenticeship program as you move through on the product side as to how you transact and how you trade.
So I've just at a distance, probably 5-6 years ago now, I was pretty involved in following crypto related developments in the legal industry, and it seems like we've tried to kind of fit crypto into our pre-existing regimes, but in some cases it just doesn't fit squarely into, is it a security, is it a commodity? Can you talk a bit about how the current regulatory regime around securities and commodities is applying, or is either well applied or failing to apply well to this new technology?
Oh, sure. And thank you for that, because that's it's interesting. You have a number of federal agencies that are looking to insert themselves into digital assets, and obviously the SEC has been pretty active in bringing cases against both exchange platforms like a Coinbase and products like a Ripple. It seems to me that initially, at the outset, that the SEC almost said, all right, we're going to pick and choose. Bitcoin, Ether, yeah, those look like commodities. Those don't look like securities under Howey. we're going to give those to CFTC, and all the rest of these don't pass the Howey test. They're securities, and we're going to go after them. Except you had the CFTC who looked at it and said, well, yeah, those kind of look like commodities, but so's corn, and we don't regulate corn. We regulate the futures on corn or Bitcoin, etc. So it's kind of, Bitcoin's its own animal. It's a bit of a unicorn because you really don't, everything else beside Bitcoin is up for grabs. Bitcoin is its own animal with no management team, right? There's a white paper written by somebody under a pseudonym. So it's interesting. I think that we are going to see finally some attempt at federal regulation, because the way it works now in the exchange space for crypto is it's very much money transmitter license based, and it's kind of hammering that round peg into a square hole because okay, it's a digital currency, so maybe we treat it more like we treat those operators of exchanges much more like Western Union than we do like a Goldman Sachs, an investment bank. And where you've seen like New York, for example, with a bit license regime that is specific to crypto, and California has had various types of legislation move forward to mirror that. I really think this administration will lean into crypto in a way that we haven't previously had it. Now, what form that takes, I don't know. Does it wind up primarily with the SEC? Does it wind up with a greater CFTC mandate? Does consumer financial protection, which is really only a decade old and still looking for a mandate, do they step in? I think there's a lot to be determined. Yeah. And you've had bills through Congress, right? Whether it's out of the agricultural committees, which tend to lean more into CFTC and financial services. You know, Senators Gillibrand and Lummis co-sponsored a bill a couple of years back. I think you'll probably see that type of cooperation move forward, starting with the next Congress.
So what are, aside from knowing which regulatory regime applies to a digital asset, what are some of the biggest regulatory challenges you're seeing fintech or digital asset companies facing today?
Well, I think there are two pieces. There's the regulated entities and the unregulated entities. And then there's the new type of assets that are coming to market. And you can make an argument that crypto is a new asset, but these prediction market providers like a Kalshi or a Polymarket, and you know, we've seen these betting markets come up, especially leading into the election this year. I think they're really here to stay. It's just a matter of how regulated are they going to be.
Can you talk a little bit about how those prediction markets work, you know, and how that intersects with the regulatory environment?
Sure. These markets, Kalshi being a regulated one here in the U.S., and then Polymarket, which is unregulated and not allowed to sell into or allow U.S. individuals to operate on it. They're prediction markets. So it's a straight up or down prop bet on, for example, who's going to be president, right? And that was the lead up into last Tuesday, or 2 Tuesdays ago. You had polls and then you had betting markets. So Kalshi had won a series of court cases as recently as September to offer this product, which is essentially a derivative. to individuals to be able to buy a yes vote on, say, President Trump as opposed to Vice President Harris. So there would be an actual market, right? And that spread generally totaled 100. So it was 58, right? I think it was 60-40 at one point. You could bet on or against former President Trump. You could bet on or against Vice President Harris. And these markets have now expanded to any number of, as a matter of fact, there was something, and I'm not certain, I think it's on Kalshi, as to what the probability was of Zyn pouches being banned by year end. So that's how esoteric you can get.
Yeah.
And Kalshi is regulated by the CFTC. They have a DCM license. Polymarket does not. So they aim their offering offshore, even though they're located in Lower Manhattan. And I don't know if you saw overnight news that the Polymarket CEO had a visit by the Federal Bureau of Investigation early one morning, and his electronics have been removed. Now, what that means for the asset class, I don't know. I don't know if that's fraud-based or CFTC-based. Polymarket has previously paid a fine from CFTC for allowing U.S. users on their platform. So I think what you'd see with a Polymarket is a move towards regulation. And I think these markets are going to increasingly fall under regulators you wouldn't normally think of, like a CFTC.
Yeah. So how are our regulators approaching these betting markets in a similar way as they approach digital assets? Are we trying to kind of fitting kind of square pegs in round holes in a variety of ways?
Well, I think they have, in general, and we're speaking generally. I think the regulators have a much better handle now on what a digital currency is and what it isn't. And I think that comes with education, and that education has been from firms themselves actually going to DC and sitting with these regulators. Both the SEC and CFTC have venues within their organizations to kind of sandbox and listen to new initiatives. But it's been an education process. Right? Nobody in Congress 8 years ago knew what digital assets were, or what blockchain was, or what a cryptocurrency wallet was. They have a better feel for it now, or elements of Congress have a better feel for it now. I think these prediction market products are going to run through the same education process, but on a microwaved basis, because we have seen very clearly how effective they may be going forward, right? It's a new model.
Yeah. And what are you seeing the most promise for these prediction markets? In terms of being able to better predict. I mean, we're in the case of the election, seeing prediction markets being more accurate than the polls. Where else do you see prediction markets being effective or ineffective?
I don't know that to be honest with you, Brian, I haven't dug that deep into the prediction market. I, like everybody else, has kind of followed it with the election and with the Senate races, and with whether or not Republicans would keep Congress or lose it to the Democratic Party. So I've been drawn to it over the past 6 months that way. Seeing how it progresses. I don't know. But you figure the U.S. has really grown by leaps and bounds over the past 5 years in terms of online gambling in general, right? So whether it's Prize Picks or it's FanDuel or it's DraftKings, I think this is just another flavor.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. It's an interesting perspective. So you're not New York Stock Exchange built a compliance function within a traditional industry. Now you're building a compliance function with a non-traditional industry. What are the similarities, differences? Where have you found success?
Well, this is my second posting as a chief legal officer. So things that I generally do walking in the door is you want to look at your internal papers, right? Make sure, do you have record keeping? What do your agreements look like? Are they different from year to year? Has there been a redraft of anything in the past 3 years? So you do an inventory.
Yeah.
And that inventory encompasses just about everything in the legal sphere. So you look at 6 months of outside counsel bills, and in late stage private companies, you see a substantial spend generally in outside counsel billings because you haven't in-housed it yet, right?
Yeah.
You've grown the idea, you've built out your business side, but the control functions generally bring up the rear. So
Right.
doing things like that and dealing with multiple entities. Our structure is one of several arm's length affiliates rather than subsidiaries. That, if not handled right, can become unwieldy in a hurry. So making sure that you have the proper intercompany agreements and attachments, and making sure that your insurance coverage spans all your entities, whether it be D&O or cyber. That one's, it's a process like anything else. But it's different than what I've done on the regulatory side, right? The first word in general counsel is general. So you're responsible for just about everything now, rather than where your career has taken you in terms of your specialty, right? That all goes out the window. Yes, you can draw on it from time to time, but you're going to be dealing with human resources issues. You're going to be dealing with a contract issue that's gone sour. So it's, from that standpoint, your day is different every day.
Yeah.
Sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a less good way.
So how much of your day-to-day are you doing compliance work versus more general counsel work?
We have a risk team that performs that function outsourced, so it's primarily legal. And it's interacting with your internal clients, any external clients that have issues, and then strategic and conceptual issues moving forward, right? New business initiatives or fine-tuning existing initiatives. Do we want to add a product, or is this product, how would we sunset this with our customers if we wanted to do that? So it's a lot of that.
How are you seeing a technology company within the digital asset space? Is it operating a bit differently than some of the prior companies that you were working with? And if so, how?
It's much more of a casual environment within a professional backdrop. So whereas my career always had financial service professionals at its core, and you kind of knew everybody spoke the same language because they went through the same process of taking a Series 7 or a CFA. Technologists are geniuses, but you're not dealing with a common language. So having to, in certain instances, over-explain or have something over-explained to you so that you can capture it from a legal perspective has been a, it's a challenge, but it's a fun challenge because you do learn.
Tell us a little bit about FPFX Technologies, what the business that you're in, and also kind of what the company, who the company employs, and who you work with most closely on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I'll take the last part first because it's easiest. I deal with our CEO and management teams generally. So whether that's operations or tech or dev, I'll be dealing with people much more senior. At the point it gets to me, it's less conceptual and more practical.
Yeah.
So we're trying to either put the right verbiage in disclaimer language or put together customer-facing terms and conditions that encapsulate any new product. So it's a lot of, once you build out those functions, then it's just constant. It's like gardening, right?
Yeah.
You're pulling up weeds and putting in new rhododendrons every quarter, and you want to make sure that gets downstream to your clients, and make sure that it is correct from a product perspective, right? From a business perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So how many are you primarily, does FPFX primarily employ engineers and technologists? And
it's engineers, technologists. It's a technology shop. So it's basically a lot of technologists putting things together, and then risk management groups, because we do package modules like that, and algo developers, and then operations and client service people. So we're about 80 people large. So we're at that, no longer considered a startup. We're a 4-year-old firm. And it's one of those nice places to be before that next jump of growth.
Yeah. Have you taken any institutional financing yet?
We haven't yet. No, we have not taken any financing. We're privately held and happy at that point. Going forward, we may look to put a round out if the right growth opportunity presents itself.
Right. So, where do you see the regulatory environment? I mean, you've really been involved in this from a regulatory perspective. Where do you see things going over the next few years?
I think the tone is really going to be set by Congress this time. And I think recent court decisions with the Supreme Court have kind of underpinned that. Right, you had the SEC case and Loper. So I think that the administrative agencies as a whole are starting to look to reinvent or pull back a little bit. I think with respect to financial regulators, it really depends on who succeeds Gensler, and what that tone will be. I mean, the first incarnation of the Trump administration had Jay Clayton in that role, and he was not a prosecutor by trade. He was a deal guy and an M&A guy by trade. So I think it really depends on who sits in that chair once January comes forward.
Yeah.
I think our current administration's regulators have been a little heavy-handed, and not very forthcoming with guidance. So I'm kind of hoping for a regulatory body with a little more guidance and, a little more carrot and a little less stick.
Have you been following? I mean, there have been Bitcoin ETFs released. Can you tell us a little bit about what's, how those products kind of came to get approved? What you're seeing the future for them and the promise of them being?
Well, I think it's great that they were finally approved. One man's opinion is that the SEC ultimately had no choice but to approve a Bitcoin ETF in the manner that they did. Because,
why is that?
Well, they had been dragging their feet on the filings that had been placed, and there were so many of them at that point, it was inevitable. They had approved an ETF that was it was a paper ETF as opposed to a real underlying Bitcoin ETF, if that makes sense. It was close, but it wasn't really what the industry was looking for. And now you've had major players in financial services really start to embrace Bitcoin specifically, but digital and crypto holistically. So I think the SEC's hand was forced on the first round of ETFs. But that said, right, it's a matter of time before you get the second and third waves of those in other digital assets.
In the international space, how are you seeing different regions approaching the regulatory environment for digital assets across the US, EU, and Asia, for example? How are you seeing things change?
Well, that's a pretty expansive question, Brian. It's funny. If you had asked me that question a year ago, I would have said that, Japan really took the lead on digital asset regulation. And I think by and large, that was due to Mt. Gox happening on their soil. The JFSA has been very proactive in crypto regulation. The EU has draft regulation pending. So it's there, but it's not there. The FCA in the UK has swung back and forth on crypto regulation. So I think really that Europe is waiting for the US to do something so that they can follow suit.
Yeah, and then we saw EU take a bit of a first step on AI and get some blowback on how restrictive some of their regulations were there. I think it wouldn't be a surprise to see them take a bit of a slower approach here. When fintech companies are expanding internationally, does FPFX have an international footprint, or are you primarily or exclusively US based?
We're primarily US based. We have an office in Serbia that we do some of our dev work there, and some of our servers are there. But it's from an international framework. Again, it goes from there's a difference between regulated entities and unregulated entities. Regulated entities tend to open up affiliates abroad rather than expand your existing footprint, just to prevent regulatory bleed through from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Right. So like in the broker dealer space, you would open up a UK affiliate to sit under FCA oversight as opposed to SEC oversight here in the US.
Yeah.
And, I think firms still do that. Fintech firms definitely do that.
Yeah.
And I think it's smart because you really don't want the bleed through to other jurisdictions. It's not helpful to the local population that you're serving as opposed to the ones you serve in the US.
Yeah. Well, you talked a little bit earlier about right-sizing the firm's reliance on outside counsel and determining how best to deploy outside counsel. What approach do you typically take for things like that?
Well, as a back of the envelope measure, I will ask for and go through 6 months of bills, right? First, you determine who you're using, what you're using them for, and then you look at billings. And, it's an eye towards quality as opposed to quantity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Firms generally don't have a problem paying for services, but it's an age-old problem of, hey, wait a minute. What are these 3 units that I'm paying for every week? Right? It really is a matter of reviewing bills. I've been at firms where bills were not heavily scrutinized, and I've been at firms where nobody's getting paid until the person who contracted for the work actually signs off on the bill. So it works both ways. I think it gives me a really good, quick eyeball as to where we are. And there are plenty of things that can very easily be done in-house as opposed to outsourced. You can go either way. If you're going to outsource, I don't know that you need a $2,000 an hour partner for certain things where you can go through, a fee agreement or put it out to bid. And we've done both here. I've done both in my career, and it works out pretty well.
What do you like to keep in-house?
I like to keep the commercial stuff in-house to the extent that I can. Initial inquiries I like to keep in-house. Anything that's regulatory based, first, second stage, God forbid it goes to the third stage, obviously you need outside help, but I like to keep those in-house. Expanding the firm type stuff, generally you go to bid. So equity compensation or a different org structure, you want buy-in from outside counsel on those. If you're structuring a new initiative from scratch, you're obviously going to look for somebody to help you externally. But day-to-day stuff, a lot of it is maintained here by our guys. Collections will go outside, obviously. But the stuff leading up to collections, the nasty gram negotiation back and forth, there's no reason for that to go external.
So best practices you've seen this is your second role as GC / CLO. What did you learn from your first go around that you're applying this time?
It's an excellent question. Patience. Definitely patience, and being able to recognize the other side of the question being asked. So what is the business purpose behind right? There are times where you don't operate with all the information. So you want to try and minimize the amount of information you don't have in order to give a credible answer. So in my first go around, I was not afraid to give an off the cuff answer that, occasionally you had to unwind.
Yeah.
So that would be one that I've definitely learned.
Yeah. And who do you find yourself relying on most for information you don't know? Are you going to the executive leadership team? Is there someone within product that you find yourself really connecting with best?
It starts with product. It certainly starts with whoever the questioner is, the person who walks through your door with the problem or the idea is the one you really have to make some time to sit down with and fully explore it. If you're going to senior leadership on every initiative, you're not going to get anything done, and neither are they.
Yeah.
Right. It's like teaching a gorilla to write with a pen. Eventually, they're going to get ticked off, and you're going to be wearing the pen. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, Sean, we like to end these episodes with the advice that you would give to a junior or aspiring attorney that wants to be in your shoes someday down the line. What would you say to him or her?
I would say that in order to do that, you want to be an advocate for your client. And on the in-house side, your client is your business people, are your business people. Yeah. So it's a difficult role, or it's a difficult line to walk. But you want your business partners to think of you as a partner and as an advocate to help you solve problems, rather than be the roadblock that says, no, you can't do that. That's crazy. You have to make that no sound more like a yes. So if you can help them troubleshoot where they want to go, if they come to you with a possibility and you've scoped it out, you say, okay, well, if you can answer how we do these 3 items, I think we can get there. Right. So you have to propose solutions as well as, or help them get to that solution level. That's what I would recommend to aspiring attorneys who are looking to do this.
Well, you're in an exciting industry, an exciting time. I wish you all the best with FPFX, and we'll be following you. And thanks again for coming on.
Brian, thank you so much for making time. This was great.